Do I have a microphone? I do. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming to Piano Bar Saturdays. For relaxing times, make it Piano Bar times. Staff, Cracking the Code staff is texting me during relaxing times. There's no work allowed during Piano Bar Saturdays. All right, what are we doing here with a piano keyboard? Isn't this supposed to be a guitar channel? Not really, actually. It's just a channel for all the things musically that I don't know and that I wanted to figure out. And we've been really kind of interested in these mechanical things because on guitar, as you can see, and you can probably infer from what you're seeing here, that the barriers to creating this kind of music on guitar are far stiffer. They're far steeper, and they're harder to get over than they are on piano. Why is the staff texting me again? I think you could bump up the levels a little bit, both key and vocals. Well, we're not going to do that right now because it's just a test. If you can hear me, we'll get it right next time. Anyway, so as I was saying, it is easier to play this kind of stuff on piano. Obviously, it's easier. Look at, there's one, we have C right here, we have C right here, C right here, and it's the same fingering every time. And arpeggio, well, it's the same as your chord shape. Imagine if you had a bar chord. Stop texting me, Staff. And if you're using autofocus, it's grabbing the keyboard a bit more than you, but not too far off. Okay, thank you. I'm not using autofocus. I use manual focus, but I don't have staff here because it's Piano Bar Saturdays and we take what we get. If I lean forward, maybe that'll look better. So anyway, arpeggiating, well, here's a chord, right? Here's a C major 7 chord. Would you like to arpeggiate this chord? You might. And how do you do that? Well, you play the notes separately, quite simply. Would you like to play this finely arpeggiated chord through octaves? Well, I would too. And it's as simple as... and simple as hitting the damper pedal at the right time. So a lot of this now, you will hear, there's probably, we put a clip on the channel somewhat provocatively titled Piano versus Guitar, which is easier. And I have my own opinions on this, obviously, because I've been doing both for a really long time. And there are things that I can do on keyboard that I could never do on guitar, and I didn't even know why I couldn't do them on guitar. And it was only after years of trying to do both that I realized that some of the challenges for improvisation, move this forward, that might get a little better focus, are much more straightforward on piano in ways that I never considered, like the fact that your chord shape is your arpeggio shape. Well, what is playing through the changes on a piano? It's nothing more than holding down the chord that you're going to be holding down as a rhythm player anyway, like C. And then you want to play a lead? Well, sure. Oh, I added another note. That's not part of C. It's a C add 2. But it's right there, and it's so second nature, you don't even think about it. Am I playing through the change? Well, what did I just do? Well, here's my F major 6, F, A, C, D, and I did that arpeggiating through the octaves trick again. But it sounds like you know more than you know, and it sounds like you're doing more than you're doing. So anyway, this concept of playing through the changes as a challenge was not even a thing that I was familiar with until I got to guitar and realized I couldn't do it. And I didn't even realize right away that I couldn't do it. I just realized that over a long period of time, after however many years of playing rock tunes like Van Halen stuff and Rat and Def Leppard, I realized that my improvisational chops were like really weak on guitar compared to the way they are on piano, even in the context of non-jazz harmonies, like straight ahead primary color sounds like you would get in a rock song. See, like 1, 4, 5 type stuff. But even with a real simple chord progression like that where you're not trying to embellish it in a jazzy kind of way. Let's call it like the Billy Joel or Elton John style of improvisation where you're throwing in mostly major pentatonic. Like that kind of stuff. You start doing that right away as a consequence of just holding the scale shapes. And before you know it, you're kind of a one-man band. Whereas on guitar, to do anything remotely similar to this takes you into Joe Pass territory where only geniuses live, right? And it's because I think that the central challenge of knowing how to organize notes on the fretboard with all the repeating and overlapping strings and pitches is just fundamentally problematic. It's fundamentally problematic, and who among us can think of a beginning guitar lesson where we were ever taught anything about this, right? Where we're told crazy things like memorize every note on the fretboard, but that's, I mean, I know great players that, I won't name any names looking in the mirror, Troy, that can't name all the notes on the fretboard unless it's in a chord I play all the time. And so, you know, is there a standardized approach for solving that problem, for not only understanding the harmony? Yes, there's like stacks and stacks of books for this, but how do you take that harmony and in a hands-on way actually figure out how to apply it to improvised lines on a guitar? And that is the subject of the Martin Miller interview that we just released to Masters and Mechanics subscribers. And this came about because in my initial interview with Martin, apart from being bewildered by his ridiculous alternate picking technique, the flat picking, one note per string, arpeggio things at Morse-like tempos and higher, there was, if you just forget about that, the first thing you're going to notice if you listen to any of Martin's stuff is just how effortlessly he plays through the changes and just connects these long flowing lines that go all over the guitar, kind of like you would do on a keyboard much more easily, but like very few people seem to be able to do on guitar. And there was a moment in the interview when he gave what I consider to be a critical insight into how that process actually works. He said he played some line that was in like one of the caged positions, right? Which is, we'll talk about that. But he played a line, and then I said, oh, is that how you do that in practice? And he said, well, yeah, but more playfully. And I try to get it to work right. And he used some sort of vague terms that like he understands and I didn't understand. But it gradually dawned on me that what he was saying is that he has a process for actually composing lines that flow through different chord changes and then semi-remembering them for the next time. Like not always writing them down in a little notebook, but actually creating these kind of bits and pieces of your improvisational vocabulary. And then and building it kind of on the fly in a playful way, kind of like I'm doing here, where I'm not really thinking too much about this stuff and I'm just letting the hands do whatever. But you kind of give them a little direction. And so I thought this is the thing I want to know more about, because this guy can do stuff on guitar, not just mechanically, but also musically, that most of us, I think, struggle with. So he was swinging through New York a few months ago. And he stopped over my house, and we set up all the gear and like destroyed the place. It was like wires and mics and lights everywhere. And we just had this conversation. I just put him on the spot, and I'm like, all right, we're going to break down how you do this. You said this thing. I don't even remember if you said it, but you said that you have this playful approach to doing this. And we're going to break down exactly how you create these lines according to that playful approach. And we took kind of an example of one of the positions that you might play in as a let's call it an improvisational lead player on guitar, the C major bar chord shape, this kind of thing. And we created kind of a standard stub, if you will, like the beginnings of a phrase. And then from that beginning of the phrase, we talked about all the branching possibilities that you might use to connect that phrase to the next chord and the next chord and so on. And it turns out that there's a very specific process for this, not least of which is limiting it to only one position. Because that's how the best improvisers think. I know this concept of caged is sort of a potentially provocative, another provocative concept that people love to yell about. But whether you call it caged or whether you just call it playing guitar in specific areas and knowing things in that area, the bottom line is that's what the great improvisers do, and it's very clear when you watch them and you transcribe what they do. You see the same licks repeat in the same areas, and they're usually associated with chord shapes. So we got Martin to kind of work through this process of the stubs. And it was really enlightening to get him to verbalize stuff that he does only at a semi-conscious level. And what we arrived at is a remarkably simple checklist that you can follow to essentially build out a similar vocabulary of your own. And the cool thing is it's not even specifically jazz oriented. It's not limited to jazz. It's just a workflow that you say, okay, you have a chord, you have a line, it has to go in a certain way, and it stays in a specific position, connects to another thing, and so on. And there's this set of basic requirements. And on other instruments, again, like piano, let's call it more intuitively. You know that a certain line needs to connect to a certain tone on a certain beat of the measure, and you don't really have to think about it too much. You know, oh, there I do. Right, so we just timed it, so we hit that A, and I had to throw in a passing tone to do it. Right, well, so that stuff on guitar becomes exponentially harder when you throw in the mechanical challenges of just playing these lines, getting the pick to work, getting the left hand to work, figuring out what notes you're going to choose with all the overlapping strings. The note C occurs in like 5 different places on a 6-string guitar. Granted, some of them are obviously not practical, but others in a specific area, man, you can spend all day long writing and rewriting lines to try and fit certain places on the neck. And if you've ever transcribed any classical music, like any of the Bach stuff that people like to practice, man, you can rewrite 3 bars like 50 different times. It's very clear that there's pretty much no way to sight read that stuff, I don't think, for like electric lead playing purposes with a flat pick. Classical guitar players, I don't know how they do it, actually. And I think even still, there are arrangements that take a long time to work out. And actually, a guy I know from college is now a classical guitar professor. He actually ran the classical guitar department at University of Tennessee, Knoxville. This guy, Andrew Leonard, a great guy. And we're going to get him under the camera and talk about how classical fingerstyle players arrange pieces for precisely this reason. Because this is another facet of mechanics. We're getting out of the engine room now. Like you've got all these gears turning down there that make the pick go. But once you can sort of start to get across the strings, now you have to find stuff to play with it. And you have to find lines, and you have to figure out how they're done. And it's, again, not all that straightforward on guitar as it is on these other instruments. So this is a real serious area of mechanical. I would consider it almost a mechanical type of investigation because we already have enough harmony knowledge. Like you want to talk about the altered scale and the 7th mode or the melodic minor, great. People will talk your ear off about that stuff. But how do you take that knowledge and actually translate it in a very hands-on, practical way? In other words, when you go over to your guitar, you know all this theory, you pick it up, what do you do next? Like literally, what is the first thing you do? What note do you play? What chord do you play? How do you make it work? And how do you go from day 1 to day 365 where you actually have some kind of improvisational vocabulary that you can speak of? And this interview with Martin is the first time we've ever sort of tried to get to the bottom of that problem. Not just the cage, but like literally what he does. Like, what do you play now? How would you practice that? What tempo? What notes? What would you do at that point? And so forth. I personally found this to be a really interesting conversation because it is unlocking things for me that I only do on keyboard, like altered scale type. Like that lick is actually Martin plays it, and I went home yesterday, actually, after editing the video, and I learned it. But I can do, I mean, I've been doing it on here for like a million years. But his system for it, with the fingering exactly in the place that he does it and how he connects from the altered 5, this kind of thing. Played it differently there. And that's a part of his system, right? Threw in this passing tone. It's the F sharp. And then this is the blues note, of course. But I could do all chromatic, probably. Oh yeah, right, that works, right? And we talk about that too. We talk about sort of nonsense playing, like how you can create a line that doesn't specifically follow any harmonic direction, but works because your ear hears the pattern. You hear that there's this descending thing, and you're following, and as long as you stick the landing, right? Oh yeah, as long as you hit. I got lucky on that. That's G. Hit the G. But see, this is how it works. This is the playful element of it. But you know where you're going. You're not quite sure how you're going to get there. And so, much easier to do on a keyboard. So, ladies and gents, my time here is almost through. We don't have the calling thing set up today. So in the future, when we do these things, we'll actually take questions. We're working on the tech end of that to make it real seamless for us to know who wants to ask something without needing an army of people here emailing everybody. But we're going to figure it out. But what we're going to do, which I think is cool, is we are going to do, I think we should do, based on the comments on the guitar versus piano video, some people are like, dude, this stuff is over my pay grade. I don't know what these chords are. Fine. What I would like to do is maybe like a kind of a rudimentary, get you up to speed on like 2 things about jazz harmony that anyone can understand so that you can play it on whatever your instrument is, whether it's keyboard or guitar, so that you can then watch things like the Martin interview and know what we're talking about without feeling like we're doing physics. Because there are times in there where we're talking about like tritone substitutions and it gets weird. But for the most part, we're talking about 1 or 2 things, and I can explain them pretty quickly without burying you in a pile of theory. And we'll do that at some point, maybe in another live context. So it is time that I leave you now, kids. I'm going to put on my comfortable cardigan, my walking shoes. We actually only have the studio for certain hours on Saturday, but I wanted to come in and set this up just to see, to get everything working with the keyboard view, which I think is really neat. It's a little bit tricky to get it. We need to get this a little bit more centered. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, and we will be back with some rudimentary jazz stuff at some point in the future so that we can get our heads around this crazy concept. I will leave you, how about this? I will leave you with a trivia question. I will play a lick. If you can identify where this lick comes from, we will give you the free download of your choice. Just email us, support@troygrady.com. Support, SUPPORT, @troygrady.com. Tell us where you think this lick comes from. I will play the lick now. Did I change the piano sound on this? I don't know. All right, here it goes. That's it. Real simple, right? F7, going to like A minor 9, or A minor 9. Let's do it up here. It's a lick. I stole it. We all do it. Stole it from a place. Oh, I think our camera ran out. There we go. All right, we're really done. Anyway, tell us. Let us know, and we'll be back. See you, people.